despite the woman who wrote this, I can't remember if she was one of those, I don't know what you call them, the doctors that work in, I know they call them more than doctors and researchers, the disease and vaccines and that sort of thing. But anyways, my point is, if you listen to any of this, especially the last few, she's really pulled out the stops to get somebody to take this report seriously, although they were asked to find out and investigate what happened with those vials of live vaccines going to 16 different locations. She knew that she was going to have to cite the Constitution and all other cases to get this taken seriously, but to my knowledge, nothing really happened, except for it just postponed the depopulation for about 10 years. With that, saying that, I better get going here.
92. While the preamble is not the law of the land, it has a binding character of a law in as far as it sets a clear direction, goal or objective to which activities of the constituent legal and governmental bodies, including the public health bodies of the United States when implementing vaccine programs, must align themselves in order to have any legitimate authority whatsoever. In the first place, all the articles and amendments, laws and statutes must be read in conjunction with the Constitution's preamble, which sets forth a normative structure in which the general welfare, justice, liberty, and domestic democracy have an inseparable relationship for posterity. The preamble's normative meaning is given tangible form by the provisions in the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. The preamble, Constitution and law or code or statutes are inextricably and logically connected. The preamble is the authority for the Constitution. For anything to have force and effect, it must have authority. Rules are similar to regulations, which is how the law or code or statutes are interpreted and enforced. The code is the authority for the rules. The Constitution is the authority for the code. The preamble is the authority for the Constitution. That means that the preamble is the ultimate authority for the Constitution, the code, the rules or statutes. The preamble can never, not in for posterity, under any circumstances be detached from the Constitution, and the government and its agencies cannot ever be detached from the Constitution and preamble. This is because the causality between the preamble, Constitution and rules involves a logical and not a contingent necessity. The philosopher David Hume in his A Treatise of Human Nature, 1739–1740, showed that the only necessity that links cause and effect is the logical necessity of a demonstrative argument. By contrast, when a sequence of events is observed in the physical world that is considered causal, for example, an apple falling down from a tree onto the ground, these are only impressions of the apple, its motion and its collision, but there is no logical necessity by which the cause brings about the effect. There might be an occasion when the apple does not fall downwards but upwards. We have observed apples falling to the ground every single time, but there is no logical necessity for them to fall to the ground every single time. There is, however, a logical necessity that 2 + 2 always equals 4, and that logical necessity resides in the ideas of 2 and 2 and in the idea of addition of numbers. 2 + 2 can never logically equal 3. Hume established that there was no argument for linking causes and effects in terms of powers, active forces, and so on, but that the only causal necessity was a logical one such as found inherent in the concepts of mathematics and language. Because the preamble, Constitution and Bill of Rights are artifacts of language, and the words have logical relationships between each other that involve the idea of a necessary connection, the causal links between them cannot logically be broken apart. The preamble, Constitution and Bill of Rights have the same logical relationship between them, as 2 plus 2 plus 2 equals 6. A whole can be divided into various parts just as an apple pie can be divided into slices. The preamble, Constitution and Bill of Rights form one whole but can also be divided into parts for the sake of ease of use by persons seeking to apply the law to specific and concrete circumstances. Nevertheless, the meaning of any law is not contained in one isolated word. 93. Paragraphs but in conjunction with the other parts and the overriding intention expressed in the preamble, the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, is the ultimate framework or vector for interpreting all the other laws. Those goals that are in conflict with the goals laid down in the preamble are, therefore, a priori, logically and necessarily without any legal force in U.S. law and government, that laws when detached from a constitution and normative justice can be administered in a way that is unjust is shown by the developments in Nazi Germany when legal maneuvers were carried out to obstruct and destroy the basic purpose and provisions of the German constitution. Maneuvers including the privatization or corporatization of German government functions, putting them into a legal void, referencing not the constitution or normative justice, but the performance targets of their corporate owners, that it was illegal and unconstitutional for the Nazis to use the maneuver of corporatizing government functions and replacing laws with regulations is underlined by the judgments of the U.S. Military Tribunal at Nuremberg. Under the Federal Register Act of 1935, an attempt was made to detach the operation of government agencies from the goals laid out in the preamble, Constitution and Code, binding by virtue of the logical necessity inherent in the ideas expressed in these charters on all government activities, by assigning to those government functions the status of private corporations, and in a way that the constitutional mandates and goals of the preamble did not attach to them. As a result, corporations under private law were created that appeared to be able to operate outside the preamble and Constitution and Bill of Rights on a technicality. In this way, members of the International Crime Syndicate, who have annexed high government office, were able to carry out their criminal plans under color of their office more easily. The people working for the agencies were given the status of private sector employees and were no longer public officers with an office bound to the preamble and Constitution. They were employed under contracts of corporate law that made no reference to the preamble and Constitution, from which they derived their entire authority from in the first place. They were given the status of simple mercenaries, with some of them armed and some of them unarmed, who worked for money and were required to perform certain duties laid down by their employers by and through cooperative agreements, performance of services contracts, grants, memorandums of understanding, incentive programs, and on which are controlled by the federal government. However, the privatization or corporatization of the functions of government, including public health functions, is not logically and legally the same as the privatization or corporatization of the ideas and charters underlying a government and its functions. The preamble and Constitution remain the ultimate authority over these agencies because they are the original and sole cause or authority of all government activities, including the activities of privatized public health government agencies. The limits of privatizing government functions and detaching them from the Constitution and allowing them to operate as corporations, with employees accountable to no one except to their employer in a law-free zone, are shown by the Nuremberg trials.
You ever wonder why Israel would go after some 90-year-old guy who was a guard and put him on trial for war crimes for being a soldier in Hitler's army, like if you had a choice. And you know how it is, if you don't obey orders, you get shot yourself. But the guy was only a guard, so they track him down. He's 90 years old, and they made him stand trial. But yet, they didn't make a little even whimper about all the scientists and engineers, the Operation Paperclip brought over to continue the project. You ever wonder why that is? Let me tell you why. See, the whole thing with the World War II was actually to call the Christian population. Now, I'm not a Christian, but, you know, the truth is what it is. It is the truth. As 65 million Christians died, about 6,000 Jews. They say it's 6 million, but they got that 6 million figure from the first round of starvations over there in the Ukraine under Stalin, a Jew. But what happened was the Jews went ahead and financed World War II. They came up with the idea of having the lower class Jews, less successful, be in the ones that were in prison too, taken to camps by Hitler. Basically, they paid Hitler to do it, and to make sure that they were filmed, the guards filming them taking their rings off, and what little jewelry they had on them, wedding ring, maybe some earrings or something, a belt clip, who knows. But none of the rich Jews, none of the middle class or upper class or the wealthy Jews were taken to the camps. Did you ever wonder why? It's because they were culling their own population. And they devised a way to steal the wealth of the world. Because up until World War II, they didn't control the money. They weren't rich. They weren't successful. I mean, some of them were, but not like most other Europeans. In some African nations, they weren't successful like that at all. So they had to devise a way of stealing it, which is their MO. So that's what they did. And then when people see these stories of, these poor people get their rings taken off and everything, only a fraction of those people were Jews. A lot of them were Christians. A lot of them were pagans, or what they call pagans, which is a misnomer term anyways. In other faiths. I forget which faith Hitler was. Oh yeah, that's right, he was a Jew. So anyways, that's the reason why. I'm sorry, I'm kind of stumbling with my words. I've been up for over 24 hours, and I hope everybody appreciates this, getting this information out. Again, we know it's from 2009, and again, they're restarting up the program. If you have eyes to see, you can tell that's what is happening now by pushing these laws through of forced vaccinations. And the real sad part is the parents of these children, the majority of these parents of the children allowing this forced vaccination should have stood up a long time ago, because they're gonna start crying when their children drop dead. You heard what this lady said. People who got the vaccinations just dropped dead.